Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Rock Talk with the DocRocker. I am Jeff Bonomo, joined once again by the DocRocker himself, Danton Arlotto. Gotta say happy birthday. It's your birthday week, actually. We're recording this a couple days after his birthday. He just turned 30. And that's actually going to play a little part on what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the year Danton was born, 1991. Long time ago. It's the year I graduated. That's how old I am. But the nice thing about what we do here is there is, an age difference between me and Danton, 17 years. And so there's two different outlooks on a lot of the same music, which is great. We have a lot of similar tastes in music, but yet we've heard it at two different points in our life, especially the stuff from 1991. So that's what we're going to talk about today. The year you were born and all the music that went into the transition year that was 1991, because there was a lot of transitioning going on with popular music at the time, with metal and grunge coming in, and some really strong releases by metal albums. So we're going to get rolling with that soon. How are you doing, by the way? It's been 2 weeks since we talked.
Yeah. Thanks for all of that. Thank you for the well wishes. Thank you. I feel really special that this whole episode is just dedicated to that year. This whole our talk tonight is going to be pretty much a celebration of the year 1991, and not just because of me, because of my birthday, but there's a lot of, like Jeff said, there's a lot of really interesting musical things that happened, especially in the rock world, which is funny because as much of like a big metalhead as I am now, obviously as a kid I wasn't, so a lot of this stuff I wasn't listening to right out the gate, literally speaking. So
right, you probably haven't heard these albums until like they were probably considered classics, until they're like 10-15 years old.
Some of them, yes, and some of them not even until just, we Jeff posted online and we got a bunch of feedback for albums that came out, and, we pulled up tons and tons of stuff we're going to talk about. And most of the stuff on our list is stuff that I haven't heard before, ironically enough. Well, not so ironic when you think about it, but ironic in the sense that, like, when I first got into metal, I should have that should have been a no-brainer. Like, let me look up like what was big like the year I was born. I should have probably done that, and I would have been definitely pleasantly surprised with a lot of my findings, because I definitely was. Once Jeff sent me this list, we have a ton of albums. We're going to try and touch on as many as we can, but for me, the irony of it is a lot of it's like, here's a first impression of, oh, that album came out when I was born, let me listen to it this week on the week of my 30th birthday for the first time and see what was going on in the music world when I was born. And I was definitely surprised in a lot of senses with some of my findings this week. So, and we could also, something else we're going to touch on, we have a nice little list here Jeff sent me of a lot of noteworthy events that happened in the music world, some of them celebratory, some of them tragic, and we could definitely pay a tribute to some of those goings on tonight's episode.
Yeah, it was a really interesting year, to say the least. I know not only did I graduate high school that year, like I said, music was in a transition. We didn't know it was in a transition in the beginning of 1991, but it was. So let's start with the big ones. The big releases that year, you have Guns N' Roses, Use Your Illusion 1 and 2. They set a record when those albums came out. They both debuted in the top 2 positions of Billboard 200. Only time a rock band ever achieved this. There's like 30-some songs on these 2 albums.
Yeah, it's big.
Me, that's too much. There's a lot of good stuff on the album, though. I did breeze through it recently to kind of refresh my memory, but I think that there's just too much, and to me, a lot of it's overproduced. It just didn't have the same grit as Appetite for Destruction had.
I would agree with that 100%. I first, those that follow, I just got into Guns N' Roses just a couple of years ago for like the first time, and I got really lucky because I did it like the old school way. Let me go to like a CD store and just pick something off the shelf and grab it and see what, because GNR was like one of those, like every time I heard them I was like, oh man, they sound really good, I should probably get into them, and then I just never did. So one day I finally decided to do so, and the first album I got was their first, Appetite for Destruction. I was like, oh okay, this one's got like all their famous stuff, Sweet Child of Mine's on here, Welcome to the Jungle, let me pop it in and see what it's all about. And needless to say, it quickly became one of my favorite rock albums, period, of all time. And I was like, wow, these guys are great. What else did they do? And then sure enough, like I remember when I first got into this, I made a post on Facebook about it. It was like, oh my God, Guns N' Roses, where have you guys been my whole life? And sure enough, like all the comments that got filled up by like the likes of you and like Dominic Marola and like all these other like, yeah, Appetite for Destruction is kind of all you really need from them because the rest of their stuff is kind of meh. And I couldn't believe it. So I went out and I got the Spaghetti Incident. I got Use Your Illusion. I got
Eyes is the other one, that acoustic
Rise
album
is the other one,
did.
yeah. And that's exactly what the reason it slipped my mind. It was so forgettable. I was like, wow, yeah, all these people are kind of right. But Use Your Illusion, though, like it has its moments and like some songs that are real knockouts, but like there is definitely a lot of fat, where like I made a playlist where I kind of trimmed through and combined the two albums, kind of like we talked about with Iron Maiden before, with like taking the best stuff off of No Prayer for the Dying and Fear of the Dark and just taking the best selections and making one really solid album. I kind of did the same thing with Use Your Illusion. I made a playlist on my library. When it's at its best, it's almost on par with Appetite, and when it's at its worst, it's just absolute garbage, just flaming trash heap. Like I can't even finish listening to some of these songs. Just all this like
that's how I felt.
Campfire junk and oh my God. Hate it.
Going back to that's how I felt. I was skipping more than I was listening. I still really like You Could Be Mine's probably my favorite track on either of those albums. That was also part of, I think, the Terminator 2 soundtrack. When that came out, that was a great song. I really like that. But other than that, there's a lot to like about these albums, but they are overly produced compared to the first one because Guns N' Roses was huge by then. I just it's like you said, it's there's a little bit too much. There's a lot of fat that could have been cut. It could have been just a single album, and the other stuff could have waited, because sometimes when you're listening to them, I think the Use Your Illusion 1 has like 14 tracks, and
both albums are substantial. I think they're both over an hour each.
Right. It's a lot, but
they're long.
And then that was it. And that then the band self-destructed not too long after that. I mean, the Spaghetti Incident, I believe, came after that, and that was about it. So you had Guns N' Roses at their height in 1991 with these albums, but they were very polished compared to what came before.
Absolutely.
Another band we got to mention that released something in 1991. It was probably their biggest album ever. Really changed the face of thrash metal, because they were a thrash band. They still are a thrash band. Metallica with the Black Album. That was the first album by a thrash band to hit #1 in the Billboard music charts. To me, there's not a bad track on this album. It's totally different than their album before, Injustice for All. And I don't care what anyone says. The people I used to hang out with, the metalheads I knew in high school, loved this album. A lot of people like to rewrite history because of Metallica's stance on Napster and what they did with Load and Reload, and how they're kind of not at the level that they used to be.
Mm-hmm.
Black Album is still a fantastic album. Any way you slice it, man, all those songs are great, and they're still pretty damn heavy. I threw that in the other day. I listened to it from beginning to end, and I enjoyed it for what it is. Enter Sandman. I mean, come on. How many times can you hear Enter Sandman? Sad but true.
It is a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, but the weakest track I found on it going back is probably The Unforgiven. I never really liked that track that much anyway. But other than that, man, even the Nothing Else Matters, man. It was cool. It was groundbreaking back in 1991 for a thrash band to do that and do that well.
Especially at the height of their prime.
Yeah, and every other thrash band that did it and didn't do it as well. Like that was like, and I think that actually hurt the other thrash bands. Like Testament, they went pretty soft after that. The only one that didn't was Slayer. Megadeth kind of went the same route with Countdown to Extinction. But that's a great album too. Megadeth was like the only other one I think that went a little bit softer, a little bit more commercial after the Black Album and did well. Next up, I know it's something that you just listened to for the first time. Ozzy Osbourne, No More Tears. to me, that's Ozzy's last great album. That's I like it from start to finish. I know you said you had some problems with it in the beginning, but man, the No More Tears riff, that bass riff in the beginning, it's awesome. And a lot of stuff, a lot of lyrics were written, I believe, by Lemmy. Lemmy helped with the lyric writing.
That makes
Lemmy's
sense.
Motorhead. Yeah.
That totally
He definitely. I know he wrote Hellraiser on that album because he does a cover of that on one of his other albums. But yeah, Ozzy,
nice.
some songwriting help from Lemmy and some other people, I'm sure. But that's No More Tears. What'd you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've heard the song "No More Tears" before. I consider myself like a mild Ozzy fan. Like, I love him; he's one of my favorite singers. But I don't know all of his music that well. I've never taken my trip through the entire catalog. So I figured, that was the first one on the list that kind of popped out and caught my eye. Like, oh wow, that came out that long, because I didn't think it was that old. I was surprised. I said, wow, that came out in '91. Oh man, I gotta go check that out. So I went through the whole thing cover to cover. There's some kind of like super expanded edition on Spotify, so I did that. And the first half of it, it kind of gave me Use Your Illusion syndrome, where there was a couple like real sort of hokey, like slow kind of campfire acoustic guitar kind of things. And I'm like, what the hell is this? I wasn't super impressed. The first couple of songs, it was a lot of it was like, this is like solid, great rock music, but it's just not my thing. It's not my cup of tea. It's,
Okay, so it starts with Mr. Tinker Train, then it goes to I Don't Want to Change the World. Then you get to the Mama I'm Coming Home song, which is probably
that song I've heard. I actually skipped that because I already knew that I really liked that one. That, yeah. I was like, let me just skip that and then go on to what's after that. But like a lot of the like Desire had a couple moments where I'm like, oh yeah, that riff is really cool. And I saw somebody commented on our page that it's like a super heavy album. So I guess I'm kind of spoiled by Scream, which is one of his later albums from 2010. That is like,
which is a lot heavier.
That's the kind of thing I was hoping for, because I love Scream. Like that was like, my Scream was probably your No More Tears, because it came out right after I graduated and was getting into rock and metal. And then that album dropped and I picked it up when it launched and was totally floored by it. I was like, I didn't know Ozzy did stuff that was this heavy. This is awesome. Every song on that album I love. There's not a song on that album I don't like. So I was kind of hoping for more like that.
That was definitely a heavier album for Ozzy compared to No More Tears.
Yeah, so someone calling No More Tears heavy, I was like going in there like kind of licking my lips, like ready for like some real sludgy stuff, and I didn't quite get that. But it wasn't until Zombie Stomp came on, and then it kind of turned around for me, where like it was like, wow, this could very easily pass as like a solid Guns N' Roses song on Appetite. It literally has like a similar introduction to Welcome to the Jungle. I was like, this is reminding me so much of Welcome to the Jungle, and that is by no means a bad thing. I'm really, really liking that. And the more it went on, the more I loved it. And from then on, like every track from there to the end was awesome. I totally loved it. So definitely thumbs up for the second half. I might have to re-listen to the first half now that I know what's coming, kind of like try to put the whole thing together and see. I might like it more on a second or third listen, but yeah. Yeah, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I went through the whole thing and did sort of like a cool thing to celebrate its 30th anniversary. So at least
it's a good solid album, but you're right. It is a little bit lighter when you think about the other stuff. I think there's 2 or maybe even 3 ballads on it. I have to check.
There's at least 2 or 3.
Mama Coming Home, Time After Time, and Road to Nowhere. Yeah, there's 3 ballads on there. So, it's a little bit softer. So you got like, some rock and
Road to Nowhere was a bit of an eye roller for me. Like, oh, here we go.
And that's kind of how it ends. So it's like every like 3 or 4 like rockin' tunes, they toss in like a slower one, and that's a sign of the times, really. That was 1991, going, the end of like the hairband rocking era. That's kind of how they were doing it, because it was really, to me, I believe, still playing to that MTV thing that they were doing. If you wanted to get your video on MTV, you had a better chance if you did a ballad, and that's probably what that was. Some of it, at least. I mean, who knows how, it is Ozzy, but it's not his heaviest, but I still think it was a very solid album. Next one is heavy. Next one I got to mention is heavy. Sold a ton of copies. Slave to the Grind by Skid Row. Skid Row's second album. it's way heavier than the first album. The first album was a lot more of the usual kind of glam rock, glam metal kind of stuff. This one, like, even their lyrics avoided that whole hard rock cliche kind of stuff of the 80s. Slave to the Grind, first heavy metal album to chart at #1. It came out and went right to #1 on the Billboard 200 that year. It's a great album. If you haven't ever checked it out, you should. Sebastian Bach, the vocalist, gives such an amazing performance, and everything's heavier on it. It's a very heavy, cool. The title track alone, "Slave to the Grind," man, it's a speed thrash song, man. There's a lot of double bass, a lot of not blast beats, but real fast drumming and stuff. To me, they're the big ones from 1991. Like I said, I had to include Skid Row, because even though that was their last big album that they had, and after that, grunge came around, and
rock changed forever at that point.
Rock did change. In 1991, you had Pearl Jam 10 that came out. Great drumming on that album, man. That's not to me like a grunge album. That's a classic. It has a classic rock sound to it. That's a classic rock album. Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger is another one that came out the same year, 1991. That's a metal album, man. They got labeled as a grunge band afterwards, but Bad Motorfinger, man. Listen to Outshine, man. That's dripping with Black Sabbath, influence. Then they did the Temple of the Dog, which same year. And then September 24th, 1991, Nirvana released Nevermind. And to me, that's responsible, in part, bringing both grunge and alternative rock music into the mainstream.
Yeah. Is that the album that had Smells Like Teen Spirit on it?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I thought so.
Yeah,
never heard the whole album.
That whole album it's really, really good, catchy, like pop songs disguised as like alternative, like punk rock. They're pop songs. They're written A, a little guitar solo, chorus, and you're out. And it's usually 3-4 chords. Like you said before in another podcast, very easy to learn and teach your students these songs, so they're catchy. They stick in your head. And I remember it was in September it got released, and I remember watching MTV early in the morning, waiting to go to college. I was carpooling, I believe, with a friend of mine, Chris Vitek, and he came over. He picked me up. We're driving up to college together, and I'm like, dude, I just heard this awesome. So I remember telling him, I'm like, I can't get it out of my head. It's a band Nirvana, and there's this Smells Like Teen Spirit song, and I remember he kept on like busting my balls about it. Oh, here's your song again. Like he'd be on the radio. He'd be like, here's your song. And, I loved it when I first heard it. I really did. Now, the rest of the album, I don't think is as good. It's good, catchy, but Smells Like Teen Spirit. That's where the crown goes. I have to admit that when I first heard it, I'm thinking this is something else here.
Yeah, it's funny. You think I'd hate that song because of how overdone it is, like, because I worked at a rock and roll school with kids for like 6 years, and it was naturally like you teach that song constantly all the time, and it's just one of those where like a lot of teachers that I would work with were kind of off put by it, like, oh, I gotta do this same like for me, like I never stopped loving it. I always kind of had a soft spot for it. I always got excited when a kid came in and wanted to learn it. What surprises me now we're talking about it is that I never gone and like looked it up and like looked at the rest of the album. I think I'm gonna do that, especially if they're like, yeah, I'm not gonna expect any of them are like as good, because I really
they're
like
all
that
the
song
same
too. But yeah,
they're all catchy enough. Lithium's on that album, I believe.
Oh, okay.
As You Are. They're In Bloom. They're all really good songs for what they are. They're just catchy little pop songs with a lot of distortion. The album sold over 30 million copies. It's one of the best-selling albums of all time. So, I mean, there's something there. I know, again, a lot of people like to rewrite history, especially the heavy metal elite. Listen to the album, with open ears and open eyes. It's good. It is what it is, but it's good. Going back to Pearl Jam, same thing, man. I was talking to on our Rock Talk group, Keith Hyduk, a friend of mine. He mentioned Pearl Jam 10, and I was like, yeah, that is a very solid rock album. That's not a grunge album. It's not an alternative album. That's a rock album. And from the first note to the last, I love it. I still do. Again, that was another one I revisited for this talk, and it's still as refreshing as it was back in 1991. It was something different back then, but it was like it had to me. I had a throwback sound. You know, it felt like it was a throwback to like 70s rock, more so than 80s glam. So I really like that one. Pearl Jam 10. I can still listen to that at any time. It's really good. But I don't really enjoy Pearl Jam now. I think like 10 was up here, and the rest of it are just kind of
Yeah, especially if you're not into them. They're definitely on my like no list. I'm anyone that knows me knows I'm not like a really big Pearl Jam fan either. But
if you want to hear something good, man, listen to 10. I'm sure you've heard Alive and Even Flow and Jeremy, but the other stuff on there is really, really good. Like the other tracks on there are really good. You're probably sick of hearing Jeremy, you're sick of hearing Even Flow, sick of hearing Alive, but there's Porch, there's Once. It's really weird. It's almost all the songs on the album have like one word titles. Something about the 90s.
Yeah, something about the being enamored with simplicity as a response to the kind of overinflated writing style of the 80s. I think a lot of 90s is marked by counterculture, and it's kind of funny to see like it really was like at a peak at the turn of the decade, and then it like really quickly dipped, and like rock. It's funny, a lot of people say that like rock music died in the 90s. So
it changed. It changed.
Yeah, I would not agree that it died at all. But like, you could definitely see where someone's coming from of like getting into like the peak of the late '80s stuff with all the hair and the glam and the power and the progressive, and then all of a sudden like now like grunge is like at the forefront of everything, and it's like what happened? And it's kind of to see some of that happening in '91 of like here's all these big guys, and then here's all these other dudes that are coming up. It's crazy.
I think a lot of people like were growing up like that were around my age, 17 to 20 years old, we'll say, in 1991, were starting to get sick of the same old from these 80s glam bands, and then like one of the events I have marked down for 1991 is the 1991 MTV Video Music Awards, where the guitar player for Poison was just so, I think he was so strung out or drunk or whatever, he could barely perform. I think he played the wrong song or something, and it ended up with a fist fight between him and the singer backstage. And it was just like, like how much more can you take of this? Then the Def Leppard guitar player, Stephen Clark, he died. Actually, January 8th, today, is the anniversary of his death.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he died of excessive alcohol mixed with like antidepressants and stuff. He had the band Extreme doing all acoustic Mortem Ward songs. So it was just like overexposure. But that 80s sound still kind of progressed through 1991 with some decent albums. Tesla is one of them. Psychotic Supper, with great songs on that album. Edison's Medicine. What You Give is another great track. That actually, I think, hit number 7 on the Billboard charts. Van Halen had For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge with Pound Cake, Top of the World. And the song I remember you liking when we did our whole tribute to Van Halen, the song Right Now. That's on that. So that's a really solid album. Now, Right Now, I remember it being the song for the Crystal Pepsi commercial. And I don't know if you could remember Crystal Pepsi. I don't know. It wasn't around very long, but it was pretty disgusting.
It had a throwback, I think, in the 2000s, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
Where it came back. That's when I heard of it for the first time. It's funny because at that point I thought it was a new thing.
Right Now is a great song. It just sucks that like every time I hear it, I think of the Pepsi commercial. And Eddie Van Halen said he agreed to license that song to the commercial because if they didn't agree to it, Pepsi was just going to have another band cover it. That's what he said. So that's why they just put it away.
That really sucks.
They got some flack for it. Another great album from 91 that has the kind of 80s sound is White Lion's Main Attraction. Pretty good. It was like the last probably real good one that they had. And of course the supergroup Mr. Big, which has Billy Sheehan in it, and Paul Gilbert, I think, is the guitar player.
Really?
Mr. Big, Lean Into It, really good album. Now they were only known for, like, their only hit was "To Be With You," which was a slow song. But a lot of the album jams, it's a super group of great musicians, and the album jams. It's really good. They did a Cat Stevens song too, and I can't remember what it is. But it doesn't matter. They started to be known. They're kind of like Extreme. Extreme is not the Mortem Wards band. Extreme is a great kind of rock funk band with a virtuoso guitar player, but they're known for that Mortem Wards song. Mr. Big, the super group with some some prog rock, guys in the, real great guitar player, and they're known for Just to Be the Next To Be With You song. That's another acoustic song from '91. So. Yeah, if you ever get a chance, check out Mr. Big stuff. It's good. It's good stuff,
I'll put it on the queue. Yeah,
you may like it because it's Billy Sheehan, plays bass on it, and he's just a crazy ass bass player, Let's talk about Meshuggah, the original Gent band.
Yeah, the progenitor of the Gent.
Yeah. Now you just listened to this for the first time.
Yeah, today actually, as a matter of fact, and I was so shocked to realize that they are this old, because they really made it big when the whole Gent movement started in like the late 2000s, early 2010s, and at that point that was when I first heard of this band, and as far as I knew, they were like a new thing. No, they were. I don't know if they had like a loyal fan base all the way from the beginning, or if they were kind of like a sleeper band that all of a sudden like someone went back and was like, "Whoa, what were these guys doing in the early '90s? This is nuts." So to find out that they released their debut in 1991, that for starters blew my mind. I did not know they were that old, and I kind of went in there like thinking, well, is this going to quite be like that like real genty kind of stuff that they're known for? And sure enough, it is. And it's awesome. And it's really, really cool hearing that in its earliest form on this album.
Yeah, you can hear it. You can hear
you can totally hear it.
The genesis of that style is still there. Yeah, I agree. I listened to the track too. The genesis of the gent. It's very genty. It was pretty good. I didn't listen to the whole thing recently, but I listened to a couple tracks, and you can hear it.
Track I didn't like. Yeah, there was even a couple of moments where I'm like, "Oh crap, I can't count this. I don't know what they're doing rhythmically. This is so interesting." I'm sitting there like, and I'm sitting here like with the Gent background I have, being a big Periphery fan. Like, all right, this stuff is gonna definitely fit in four. So I'm sitting there like literally like snapping my arm like to try like, all right, is that where? Man, and so some of the songs were like really throwing me for a loop, and I love stuff like that. I like things that challenge me and stimulate me and make me go, "What the heck was that?" Because then
it's a very interesting thing.
It's gonna make me want to go back and listen to it again and again and again. Yeah, I definitely like that one a lot.
I don't know much more about them other than that, but I do know, at least what I read was the Gent influence gets even greater on the next album, and then the next album after that. So. This
album definitely sounds different than their newer stuff. It's not as heavy, but I mean, it kind of is in its own way. It's almost as heavy, but like, yeah, they're not quite doing the whole like 8th and 9th string thing with the guitars yet. So it's not like that super like make the floor shake heavy, but the riffs
did that even exist?
Yeah.
Did it exist back then? Like
back then? Guitar? Honestly, maybe. Probably not. Like, I think at that point, the 7-string was still kind of like a rare thing. They definitely had it because it. I know that because John Petrucci used a 7-string for Awake in '93 with Dream Theater. And that was the first album on which he had a 7-string model. And you could hear it in stuff like The Mirror, where like it's just literally chugging that low B string, all that kind of stuff. So like there definitely were artists that were using 7 strings as early as the early 90s. I don't know if there were such thing as an 8th or 9th string guitar at that point though. Now, the Gent world is commonplace. Like every artist, you got guys like Animals as leaders that have so many extra strings that are tuned solo. They don't even use a bass player because the guitar covers the bass range.
Sure,
how low it goes. It's amazing.
And I see where it comes from. You can see like where a lot of these people pulled it from was this album. That's like really cool, and at least to me, to go back and see the origins of certain styles.
Yes.
Another album I gave you a few weeks ago to listen to came out in 1991. The prog album by Fates Warning. Yeah, Parallels. I absolutely love this album, and I've been listening to it a lot since I gave it to you as homework. I've been going back and listening to it. It's such a great album, man. It has that late 80s, early 90s sound to it as far as like the mix goes. But man, I love it. I love the drumming. I love the guitar play. I love everything about it.
Yeah, I remember really digging it. I haven't revisited it since my first listen, but I definitely was thinking, I should definitely give this another listen at some point. I probably will throw that on my queue.
And like you said, the first half is a lot stronger than the second half, but still, it's pretty killer album.
Yeah, I remember the songs I enjoyed. I remember really liking them.
Yeah. Another band I want to mention that had their first album in 1991. I know you didn't really like what I gave to you, but they are, and this album is regarded as one of the very first folk metal albums. It's called The Wayward Sons of Mother Earth by the band Skyclad. That came out in 1991 as the first folk metal band, or first folk metal album. 1991 was their debut album. A lot of it is just plain metal. It really is there's not a lot of folk influence on the album actually, except for the track called The Widdershins Jig. And it's a jig. It's a metal jig.
That's awesome.
And that's where they kind of found that folk metal sound and ran with it, and so did half a dozen other bands. But yeah, that Skyclad goes all the way back to 1991 with their first album. And another band that you're not too fond of, Rush.
Funny enough, when I first got into picking stuff up and I wanted to get into Rush, that Roll the Bones, I actually bought that album at a CD store. And it was because I was looking at the back of it and I saw that it came out the year I was born. I was like, oh, let me start with this one. And I remember kind of just being meh by it. It was like, all right, this is solid, great prog rock stuff. But like, it didn't blow me away like hearing some of Kansas' 70s stuff for the first time. There wasn't quite a lot of stuff like that on it. And I was like, all right, I could get, fans probably like this a lot, but that was like one of the first tastes of, I don't know if this band is for me.
I can't speak for like the huge Rush fans. I can just speak for myself. It to me is an average Rush album. I like it. I like a lot of tracks on Dreamline. I think is a fantastic track. It's their 14th studio album. The title track. The weird thing about the title track I always thought was strange that there's a rap in it. Like in the middle, Geddy Lee raps, which is really weird. It works. Kind of, it works. It's Rush. It works. It actually. I never knew. I had to look it up. I never knew it was Geddy Lee's voice until recently. I had to look it up, and like there's like some kind of pitch shifter on his voice because it's real low. It's kind of. When I listened to it the other day, it didn't age as well, like the rap part. I like Roll the Bones, the song, just without the rap part as much. There's a pretty instrumental on there.
That's funny.
I like it better than Presto. Presto was, I think, the album before it. I didn't really like that one that much.
I never listened to that one.
You may like it. You may like it because I think it's a little bit more progressive, I think, than Roll the Bones, actually.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, I haven't listened to Presto in a long time, but as far as I think, if you ask like a crazy Rush fan, they probably wouldn't put Roll the Bones near the top. It wasn't their best, but it's
far from their worst. I would probably guess.
It's okay. The funk rock masterpiece by the Red Hot Chili Peppers came out. Blood Sugar Sex Magic.
I think that album is grossly underrated. Well, it's probably like super big amongst like diehard Red Hot Chili Peppers fans.
It is.
I'm not a diehard fan. I don't really know, but I mean, this
is the one that launched them really.
Okay.
The album before Mother's Milk, that Mother's Milk had Higher Ground, that Stevie Wonder cover.
Oh, okay.
Mother's Milk I like better, but this one.
This was the one that kind of rocketed them to superstar.
Yeah, this one
rightfully
has
so.
like Kiss on it. This one has Give It Away on it. This one has Under the Bridge on it. It's a great album. It really
is. Again, when I first started getting into all this stuff, and I checked out some Chili Peppers. I checked out this. I checked out Stadium Arcadium. Checked out one or two other albums. I forget the names, but this one really popped out to me, and not just because of the release year, but there were some really awesome, kind of really heavy, funky songs on it. And I remember thinking, oh, these guys are awesome. Yeah,
yeah. Cool. Like nowadays they're way more mellow. Like this was still, they still had that kind of punky vibe to them. You know, Blood Sugar Sex Magic's a great album. I prefer the one before it, but that's just me. Another funk band that released something in 1991 that probably no one knows about, it is Infectious Grooves, The Plague That Makes Your Booty Move. I have to mention that because it's such a great album. It's a band that's made up of the singer from Suicidal Tendencies. I don't remember who the drummer is. Yeah, the bass player was Robert Trujillo, the one who plays from Metallica now. It's just all slap bass and stuff, and real cool funky drums. Infectious Grooves, The Plague That Makes Your Booty Move. That's the name of the album. Came out in 1991. I have to plug that because it's a great, no one knows about it. It's a real underground album. But yeah, the singer from Suicidal, he wanted to make a funk album. So him and Robert and God, I can't remember the drummer's name, but he's really, really good. I don't know who plays guitar on it either, actually, but I mean, it's a bass player's album. I mean, there's a lot of slap bass going through the whole thing, and it's fun. It reminds me of what the Chili Peppers would have done probably if they didn't get so famous and start writing the same boring song over and over again.
Right. Which, shame to admit, it's exactly what happened.
It is. You know, another one I want to mention that a lot of people don't give enough credit to is Ugly Kid Joe. As Ugly as They Want to Be came out in 1991. The I Hate Everything About You song.
I don't know that.
The rest of the album is really good. That song was like, if I played it for you, you'd probably be like, oh, I remember this stupid song.
Yeah, the only I Hate Everything About You song I know is by 3 Days Grace, which is over 10 years later.
It's just as annoying as that one. It was a novelty song, basically. Ugly Kid Joe was like a joke band almost, but they shouldn't have been because they were more talented than that. The rest of the album's good. It's not great, but it's good. If you want to check out a really cool track by them, Funky Fresh Country Club is a great track on that album. I think it's the last one. It's pretty neat. You know, it kind of has like some of it has like a Faith No More vibe to it. They were more than just that one song, but everyone knew them for this MTV hit. Yeah, Motorhead released 1916 in 1991. That's a great album, 1916. Nightmare of the Dreamtime is my favorite track on that, and 1916, which is really, really cool. It's a slower kind of song that Lemmy just, he doesn't really sing ever, but
he kind of sings at that point.
Yeah. I can't forget about Primus. I'm looking through my notes. Sailing the Seas of Cheese, Jerry Was a Race Car Driver, Tommy the Cat. That came out in 1991.
Oh, really? I didn't know it was that old. Oh, okay.
I didn't know that either until now. I was thinking, shit, it's on the list.
I definitely heard a couple of those tracks. I always thought they were like, 96, 98, way later. But
yeah, Jerry Was a Race Car Driver, man. And Tommy the Cat. The rest of the album's pretty good too, but those two are the standout ones, of course, the ones everyone knows.
Yeah, for good reason.
Sure. I'm just gonna rattle off a bunch of lesser known great albums that came out that year that we don't really have to talk that much about, but we should mention them. Band DAD came out with Risking It All, which is a fantastic album. Warrior Soul, which is a band that they're very uneven. Sometimes they write some good stuff, sometimes they don't. It's kind of, you never know where you're getting with them. They came out with a really good album called Drugs, God, and New Republic. One of my favorite songs pretty much of all time is on that album. It's a song called Hero. And I don't know if you've ever heard, if you know of any other band, it's like they write like kind of mediocre stuff, and then like one song is like so much better than the rest of them. To me, sorry, Corey. I'll say sorry to the lead singer of Warrior Soul, but that's how Warrior Soul is to me. All their songs are kind of like either down here or they're mediocre. But Hero is, like I said, it's a song that came out in 1991. I still find myself listening to it over and over again. It's a great song. Metal Church came out with The Human Factor, which is a fantastic album by Metal Church. That may be a homework assignment for you someday. That's a really good metal album. And of course, classic doom metal, Solitude Aeternus did their first album in 1991, Into the Depths of Sorrow.
That's their first? Oh, okay.
Their first album came out in 1991, Into the Depths of Sorrow, yeah.
I was going to ask you about that one, because that,
yeah,
that wasn't the one that I did a couple weeks ago.
No, that was Through the, what was it called? Oh, God, Through the Darkest Hour.
Yeah,
that was like
say, I recognize the band, but I don't recognize the album name. So that one's definitely up on my list because I really liked the album I did listen to by them. So I'm looking forward to hearing more. So I'm going to check that one out too.
Now, Into the Darkest Hour, I would save that for later. I would go to the one they did, I think it's in 93, called Beyond the Crimson Horizon. That's a little bit more progressive, kind of, a little bit not so straightforward and not so dirgy slow. This first one it's like it's slow. It's all the way through. It's like
that's kind of what I think I want to check that out first, just to see, just to kind of go into the great beyond, you know.
Yeah, I prefer Crimson Horizon to Into the Depths of Sorrow, but you know, to each his own, man. And
well, screw it, I'll check them both out because, like I said, Halloween, I really like what I heard so far.
Halloween came out with Pink Bubbles Go Ape. That's an album that's kind of like some of it's really, really good. Some of it's like I don't know what you're doing here. But yeah, that's about it as far as like, you know, albums that like were interesting enough.
Yeah, at least like noteworthy releases. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mentioned like, you know, Poison, the band Poison was crumbling in 1991. Def Leppard's, you know, guitar player and one of their main songwriters died. You know,
yeah, there were a lot of deaths in 91 for famous musicians.
Right, well, Freddie Mercury, the one I was going to talk about next, he died of AIDS in November 24th, and Eric Carr, the drummer from Kiss, died the same day. And I really liked Eric Carr. I really thought he was a fantastic drummer. You know, so there's all this stuff happening in the world of rock. Who's dying? Who's getting in fights? What bands are breaking up? Or what bands are releasing albums that aren't doing as well? And then, you know, in comes grunge. You know, and the second half of the year, by September, you have these three pillars of grunge albums, or four actually, if you count Temple of the Dog. They're all out by September. So the whole thing is changing, and then, you know. Then by the end of the year, no one wants to hear, you know, hair band stuff anymore.
Yeah, not even thrash. You know, at that point, you know, only the hardcore guys were listening to the Black Album.
Thrash may, you know, survived a couple years after that, but it was a steady decline into the 90s. So the popular thrash bands weren't on the top anymore. You know, like Anthrax, they were going through a singer dispute back then too. There's a lot of weird stuff going on right at the turn, you know, of the decade there in 1991, 92. A lot of stuff that was going on that was kind of killing off the heavier stuff, the metal bands that I really liked. And you know, well, Queen's not a metal band, but still, I mean, I really liked Queen. I'm not a Queen fanatic, but I mean, Freddie Mercury dying made me actually check out that album, Innuendo, which was the last one with Freddie that was released that year. That's a pretty good album. It's hard to listen to it because you know he's recording it as he's dying, you know, and it's a really hard listen when you know that, you know, but it's a pretty solid album, I'd say. I really like that album.
Yeah, I've never been a big Queen fan either. They're not my thing. But I always feel just kind of like this weird guilt, though, that like it was the year that I was born, and like the year that one of rock's greatest singers of all time passes away. So I always feel bad about that, as if I had something to do with it by being born. You know, I know it's a stupid thing to think, but that's just always how I felt. But
well, as far as death goes, we got one more to talk about, which is Mayhem's vocalist, dead.
Oh, yeah.
1991. Shoots himself in the head with a shotgun and slit his wrist with a hunting knife. He left a note reading, "Excuse all the blood." Photographs of his corpse were taken by his bandmate and were later used as cover art for the bootleg album Dawn of the Black Hearts.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not a big black metal fan. I find these guys interesting, probably for all the wrong reasons, but I find all that stuff really interesting. We did a whole podcast about black metal. I don't really like a lot of the black metal music. It doesn't really do it for me. But man,
understandable.
It definitely
defines itself as different. But
yeah, these guys were interesting. I mean, they lived some interesting lives and times, over there in Europe. But yeah, that's
yeah. And for those looking to get more on that, check out that. It's not quite a documentary, but it's like that movie that we mentioned in the episode that kind of has like pretty much like from the perspective of Euronymous all the way through. The whole first part of the movie
Lords of Chaos.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, the whole first maybe like half hour to hour of that is like from the perspective of like when Mayhem was like starting and rising up, and you have Dead as like a frequent character on the, and you actually, not to spoil too much, but you get to see the scene where Dead kills himself.
Now there is a documentary called Until the Light Takes Us that is about, if you want to see a documentary on that same story and the whole black metal scene, is called Until the Light Takes Us. It's a lot of it is interviews with Varg, behind the scenes look at Norwegian black metal scene basically, but a lot of it is interviews with Varg from Mayhem, and a couple other people in the scene. But yeah, that movie though, Lords of Chaos.
Yeah, it's
really good,
like a dramatization, like a Hollywood-esque kind of thing of it. But
yeah, depending on what you want to watch. I mean, Until Light Takes Us tells pretty much the same story as Lords of Chaos. If you want to watch the documentary, watch that. I would say watch them both because they're both very, very interesting. They're. I don't know. Have you seen? I don't know if you've seen Until Light Takes Us. If you haven't,
no, I haven't seen that. I've seen Lords of Chaos, but I haven't seen Into the Light.
Until the Light Takes Us is a very good documentary, and it's a few years old. 2008, so it is quite a few years. Actually, yeah, it came out a while ago. I don't know how I ran across it. I think Netflix had it way back when it was new, and I just kind of stumbled on because I didn't know anything about any of this back then. That's how I found out originally about this stuff, was that documentary. I'm like, wow, this is really messed up.
Yeah, yeah, it's very, very messed up. Very disturbing.
So that was 1991.
Yeah.
In a nutshell.
the year many consider that a lot of music died, but more specifically put, a lot of musicians died.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? There's another album I wanted to mention I totally forgot about, was the band Death released the album Human, which is like progressive death metal. They continued along the progressive path with their other albums, and then a few members formed the band Control Denied, which is a really, really good progressive metal album. And then the reason why I mention this is because God, I can't remember the guy's name. Chuck, the main songwriter's Chuck something. God, the metalheads are going to kill me. They're going to hang me. He was such a great guitar player, and he died of cancer, and so he was like taken from us like way too early before he did like what he probably would still be doing. But his band Death, Human, was the album that came out in 1991. It's a really good album if you like progressive death metal. Like it's normal death metal, you got the whole growly stuff going on, but there's progressive elements to it, which is nice. But the other albums after Human, they get even more progressive, and they get more into that progressive metal kind of feel, which makes it way more interesting to me. Straight death metal or straight speed or straight anything like that kind of gets boring after a little bit. I'm sure you agree with me. When you throw a little bit of progressiveness in there, a little bit of prog, it's a little dash sometimes.
Yeah, that perfect blend of seasons and spices.
Yeah, you have to. You got to season your music, man. Overkill, they released an album, Horoscope. Saigon Kick released Saigon Kick. Sabotage, the Trans-Siberian Orchestra guys, before they were TSO, they released Streets of Rock Opera. And I bet people will yell at me if I don't mention that. Because we have
especially
a lot
the last
Sabotage.
couple episodes, we kept talking about Sabotage. Yeah.
Yeah. Streets of Rock Opera is pretty good. I like Gutter Ballet and Edge of Thorns. I like them better. But Streets of Rock Opera is really good. Yeah, that is my entire list of bands that I wanted to mention.
I think we pretty much hit all the ones on this list here. I'm looking at it now. Yeah.
That was 1991. So, hey, happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really it's cool to get this like real deep insight into what was really happening that year, because obviously, of course, I didn't know anything about it. You know, it was the last thing on my mind at the time. Even though I was born early and got to I was around when all of this stuff happened. I'm born right at the start of the year, but yeah, naturally, I don't have any recollection of any of that, and especially because in my case, I really didn't get into like a lot of metal stuff until my later teen years. So at that point, we were like already well into the 2000s, and like all the 90s was just a memory now. And I'm kind of all of my musical discoveries are all retrospect. It's all looking back on something after it was already in its heyday. I'm not so much of picking up things that are going on right now as they're coming out, with few exceptions. But yeah, it's funny because a lot of my taste, I feel like it's going to kind of flip on its head when we do the inevitable 1973 episode, because there's so much music from the 70s that I like got into at the same time, and like kind of going back to sort of share. A lot of the music I like is older than me.
Maybe we'll have to find someone that was like, at least 20 years old in 1973.
Yeah.
Tell them what it felt like, to see like the Black Sabbath albums coming out for the first time, the Deep Purple albums coming out, and, the Zeppelin albums that came out that year. There's a lot of good music that came out in 73 when I was born, and a lot of good music. And I didn't discover it until I was probably, 8, 9, 10 years.
Yeah.
Or even older. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still go back to some stuff from the 70s. It's like, I never got a chance to hear this, or I never got around to listening to this album from, wherever, 73, 74, or something like obscure, like the band Lucifer's Friend from the early 70s. That has such a cool sound. I know I sent it to you and you're like, oh my God, there's a band, a rock band playing with a French horn,
Yeah, it's goofy stuff.
It's always cool to, like we say when we end every podcast here, it's always cool to find new music, and you just got to keep on finding new music and keep on listening and jamming and all that good stuff.
Yeah, especially now, even though the calendar flipped, things really aren't all that different yet. So we have to still kind of keep our heads buried and, find ways to pass the time. This is the way to do it. Listen to music and think.
Yeah, and I urge everybody, that wrote off the Metallica Black Album because of, the tracks you hear over and over again on the radio. Go back to that one. Listen to the other stuff on that album. There's a lot of great everything on that from beginning to end. Every track is good. You know what? The ones you hear on the radio all the time, like Sad But True and Nothing Else Matters, Unforgiven, and Enter Sandman, skip them. Skip them and listen to.
Or just listen to them because they're great. Get over it.
I'm saying if you're sick of them, skip them. Listen to like Through the Never. Listen to Don't Tread on Me, The God That Failed. That stuff. Listen to that. It's still just as good. It's great. It really is. And Skid Row, Slave to the Grind. I'll have to toss that one out there again too, because that's
that one I'm definitely really eager to check out, because I know nothing of Skid Row. Like they're a band I know very little about. So
that one, actually, the one that they've released after that, I like also. Skid Row Subhuman Race. That they released a couple years after that. That was like right in the middle of like the whole grunge revolution, and like no one bought it, no one likes it. I like it, but whatever. But yes, listen, just check out the title track, "Slave to the Grind." If you like that, you're gonna like the rest of the album probably. So
cool.
That'll do it for me.
That'll do
That'll
it for
do it
me.
for me. I'm done.
This was a lot of fun. I'm excited. We could even make a kind of thing out of this where we like touch on different years, not even just the years we were born, but we can maybe do that, especially for special guests. If you know,
Yeah.
if any members of the group, you know, if you have like a 92, 93, 94 birthday, or you know, I know we got a lot of different people of a lot of different ages that are on part of the group, so we can do 80s episodes, 70s episodes. I'm totally down for that. That could be a lot of fun. And it's a really great way to really dig deep and find lots of new music to check out.